ever feel like your to-do list is trying to eat you? Like you're drowning in tasks and just want to hide?
Yeah, I think we've all been there.
Well, today we're taking a deep dive into this book, Eat That Frog by Brian Tracy, to learn how to tackle those big, scary tasks and finally get rid of that overwhelmed feeling.
Eat That Frog. A classic, right?
Totally. And it's gotten tons of praise online. Micro Business Hub says it changed how they work. The Simple Dollar loves all the different tactics it has for fighting procrastination. Even the Carnegie Library business librarians, can you believe that? They actually highlighted it in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette for having some really practical exercises.
Sounds like it's resonated with, well, everyone from business owners to people just trying to get their lives together. But honestly, what I find most interesting is the author, Brian Tracy, himself. He's had so many different jobs. He's built multiple companies, so his whole approach to productivity just feels different, more real.
Right. So let's get into this eating the frog idea. The book uses it as a metaphor for tackling your biggest, most important task first. But how do we even figure out which task is our frog?
It's not necessarily about the one that takes the longest. It's more about, the impact.
Oh, okay.
Your frog is the task that if you finished it, it would have the biggest positive effect on your day, your week, even your whole life, potentially. And funny enough, it's often the one we put off the most.
So it's kind of like finding that one thing that if you get it done, everything else feels easier, like a domino effect almost.
Exactly. And by doing it first thing, you create this momentum and you get rid of that feeling of a deadline looming over you. So like Tracy says, the key to reaching Carnegie Hall, practice, practice, practice. You got to build a habit of tackling those big things head on.
That makes a lot of sense. But how do we actually force ourselves to eat the frog when procrastination is like whispering sweet nothings in our ear?
Goal setting. It's the most important thing. Tracy says that written goals, they're like rocket fuel for actually getting stuff done. He has this whole 7-step process. But the gist of it is that you got to really, really want that goal. You have to believe you can achieve it. And you got to set a deadline, like a real one, with some pressure.
So it's not just about wishing for stuff, but actually setting ourselves up to make it happen.
Totally. And once you've got that goal locked in, you got to make a plan, right? Tracy's big on making lists, daily, weekly, even monthly. He says every minute you spend in planning saves 10 minutes in execution. And I think he's right.
Wait, isn't that the 10-90 rule? 10% of your time spent planning saves 90% of your time on execution.
You got it. Think about it. Having those lists keeps you focused on what you actually need to get done instead of wasting time figuring out what to do next.
Okay, lists, check. What else helps us stay on track?
Ever heard of the 80-20 rule? Sometimes called the Pareto principle?
Oh, yeah, that 80% of your results come from 20% of your effort.
Right. So if we apply that to our work, it means we got to figure out which tasks are in that crucial 20% and make them our top priority. We often procrastinate on the stuff that actually matters the most and get caught up in things that don't really move us forward.
So, how do we know which tasks are the big ones, the ones that really move the needle, so to speak?
Tracy suggests looking at your key result areas. He calls them KRAs. These are basically the essential parts of your job. So for a salesperson, their KRAs might be closing deals and building relationships. For a writer, it might be creating great content and meeting deadlines.
So figuring out the core responsibilities that, if you do them well, lead to big wins.
Yeah, precisely. And here's the thing. Your weakest KRA can hold you back in all the others. It's like that saying, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link.
Okay, starting to see how it all connects. But what about long-term thinking? Does Tracy talk about that at all?
He does. He says that having a clear vision for the long term can change how you make decisions every single day. Yeah, it's about asking yourself, what's going to happen if I do or don't do this task? Not just today, but a year from now.
So aligning your daily actions with your big picture goals.
Exactly. It's what's it called? The law of forced efficiency, right? How we always find time for things that really matter when we're under pressure.
Yeah, totally.
That actually leads to one of my favorite concepts, creative procrastination.
Creative procrastination? Isn't that a contradiction?
Haha, well, maybe. But what Tracy means is strategically delaying or even completely getting rid of tasks that aren't that important to free up time for the high-impact stuff. Like this golfer he talks about in the book. The guy realized he had to cut back on his golfing time to prioritize his family and his business. It was a deliberate choice to procrastinate on something he enjoyed, to make space for what truly mattered.
Wow, that's like using procrastination to your advantage.
It really is. It's about making conscious choices that line up with your goals.
So we've covered setting goals, planning our day, the 80-20 rule, key result areas, and even using procrastination creatively. Anything else in Tracy's toolkit for prioritizing tasks?
Well, he's got this thing called the ABCDE method, which basically helps you categorize tasks based on how important and urgent they are.
Okay, lay it on me.
So picture this. A, tasks. Those are your frogs, the most important and urgent stuff you absolutely have to do. Then there are B tasks, important, yeah, but not as urgent. C tasks, those are like nice to haves, but they won't make or break your day. D tasks are things you should try to delegate if possible.
Makes sense so far. What about E-tasks?
E tasks are the ones you should just get rid of. They might have been important once, but now they're just eating up your time and energy.
Oh, those are those time wasters we all cling to.
Exactly. This system forces you to look at how important each task really is and make conscious decisions about your time.
Okay, I love that. It's all super actionable, not just theory. But what about those times when you feel stuck, like something bigger is holding you back?
That's when you got to look at what Tracy calls your constraints. He believes there are things, both inside us and outside of us, that slow us down. Internally, it's about honestly looking at our weaknesses, skills, or habits that might be holding us back.
Being brutally honest, huh? Even if it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, it can be. But it's also like super empowering. And then there are the external constraints, things in our environment that are getting in the way, like inefficient processes or not having enough resources.
So looking at the big picture and figuring out what those bottlenecks are.
Exactly. And like Tracy talks about with this story of a company that realized they were pricing their stuff wrong and it was tanking their sales, sometimes a tiny constraint can have a massive impact.
Good reminder to always be looking out for those hidden obstacles. So once we've figured out what our constraints are, what do we do?
Well, we got to focus our energy on getting rid of them.
Yeah.
Even small improvements in our weakest areas can make a big difference. Yeah, it's like you said, removing those bottlenecks so everything can flow better.
I like that. And speaking of flow, Tracy also talks about having a sense of urgency. But isn't that, like, kind of stressful?
Not if you do it right. It's more about having this inner drive to take action and get stuff done without overthinking it or procrastinating. It's like flipping a switch in your brain to be more focused and productive.
So it's like that I gotta get this done feeling, but in a good way.
Exactly. Tracy actually suggests some interesting ways to do that. You could set really firm deadlines for yourself, or like visualize what would happen if you didn't take action. He even talks about having a personal mantra, something like, do it now, do it now, do it now, that you repeat to yourself when you're feeling unmotivated.
Okay, that's actually pretty cool. But what about all the technology we're surrounded by? How are we supposed to deal with that and not get totally distracted?
That's one of the most relevant parts of the book, I think. Tracy's got a whole chapter on managing tech. He even calls it a wonderful servant, but a terrible master.
Yeah.
He says all the distractions from our phones and email can really mess with our focus and stop us from reaching our goals.
It's true. It's like we're addicted to notifications and scrolling. He even tells this story about a business lunch he went to where a bunch of executives were on their phones, even during a prayer.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. Tech can really disconnect us from what's happening right now and totally kill our flow. But the good news is, Tracy has some great advice for getting back in control.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me how to reclaim my focus.
First, limit checking email to just a couple of times a day and turn off those notifications.
That would definitely make my inbox feel less chaotic.
Right. He even suggests setting up an autoresponder to manage people's expectations, like setting some boundaries.
Oh, that's smart. Then you're not pressured to respond immediately, and you can deal with email all at once, way more efficient.
You got it. And here's a radical idea he even says, to consider deleting your entire inbox.
Wait, delete everything. Isn't that a bit extreme?
Maybe. But his point is that if something's really important, people will find a way to get in touch. It's about being ruthless with digital distractions.
Okay, point taken. Anything else besides email?
He loves the idea of creating what he calls zones of silence. Basically, it's about setting aside time to completely disconnect from all tech. No phone, no email, no internet, even just for an hour in the morning, or longer if you can.
So like a digital detox to help you focus and recharge.
Exactly. Tracy thinks these breaks are essential for being more creative, improving focus, and just feeling less stressed. He also says to be really aware of how you're using tech, like choosing the communication channels that work best for you, and setting boundaries with others.
It's about being in control of technology, not the other way around.
100%. You might decide that email is your main way to communicate for work and save your phone for urgent things or personal calls. It's your choice.
Okay, I'm definitely going to be more mindful of my tech habits from now on.
Yeah.
But what about those gigantic tasks that feel totally overwhelming? Any tips on how to handle those?
Tracy's got a couple of cool tricks for breaking those down into smaller pieces.
Yeah.
The salami slice method and the Swiss cheese method.
Ooh, food analogies, I'm in.
So the salami slice method, it's basically about dividing a big task into a bunch of smaller steps that you do one after the other. Kind of like slicing a salami one thin slice at a time until it's all gone. By focusing on just one small step, you build momentum, you stay motivated, and eventually you conquer the whole thing without feeling overwhelmed.
So it's all about those small wins leading to the big win.
Yep. And Tracy says this is especially helpful for dealing with procrastination because it makes the task feel less intimidating.
Okay, that makes sense. What about Swiss cheese? How's that one work?
Swiss cheese is more flexible. You don't have to do it in order. You just pick smaller parts of the task and work on them in any order you want.
So like poking holes in a block of Swiss cheese until you've eaten the whole thing.
Exactly. This one's great for tasks that feel really overwhelming or just boring. By mixing things up and tackling smaller chunks, you feel like you're making progress and you don't lose momentum.
I like it. It's like tricking your brain into not freaking out about the size of the task. Tracy even talks about authors using this to beat writer's block. They commit to writing 1 page a day, and eventually they've got a whole book.
It's proof that consistency and small steps can really add up to something big. But it's not just about breaking down tasks, it's also about managing your time so you actually have the space to get them done.
Okay, so how do we create more time in our already packed schedules?
Tracy's a big believer in having large chunks of uninterrupted time for focused work. He says one of the biggest productivity killers is having our time constantly chopped up, like between meetings, interruptions, and all the demands of the digital world.
Tell me about it. My day feels like a million little pieces, and I never have enough time to really dive into anything.
That's exactly what he's talking about. That fragmented way of working just isn't efficient. He wants us to carve out bigger blocks of time where we can really focus on important tasks.
Okay, that sounds amazing, but how do we actually make that happen?
He's got a few suggestions. First, actually schedule those blocks of focused work time in your calendar like it's a meeting you can't miss. Second, delegate or get rid of tasks that other people can do or that aren't really essential. And finally, you got to be assertive about protecting your time from interruptions.
So basically, be proactive about structuring your day and setting boundaries.
Yep, it's about recognizing how valuable deep work is and actually making space for it.
Makes sense. But what about tasks that involve working with other people? How do we manage those effectively without constantly getting pulled away?
Tracy says setting clear expectations and deadlines for the project is key, making sure everyone's on the same page and working towards the same goal. Then, keep communication clear and open throughout the project. Things like project management software can really help streamline things and reduce all that back and forth. And finally, regular check-ins help keep the project moving and address any problems that come up.
So it's kind of like applying those same principles of planning, prioritizing, and communication to group projects.
You got it. Working together effectively means everyone's got the same goals, communication is clear, and everyone's committed to being efficient.
Okay, so much good advice here. Anything else Tracy recommends for making the most of our time and getting more done?
He's got one more technique that kind of ties everything together. He calls it single-handling every task.
Single-handling? What's that?
Basically, it means focusing on one thing at a time until it's totally done. No multitasking or jumping between different things.
So like committing to one task and seeing it through before moving on.
Exactly. Tracy believes single-handling is way more efficient than trying to do a million things at once, which can actually make you less productive.
Right. It's like juggling. The more balls you have in the air, the more likely you are to drop one.
That's a great way to put it. When we try to do too much, we end up doing nothing well. Tracy explains it with this efficiency curve. When you're focused on one task, you get better and faster as you go. But every time you switch to something else, you break that flow and have to start over from a less efficient point.
So it's like taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back every time you multitask.
Exactly. Plus, all that switching back and forth can make you tired, cause you to make mistakes, and ultimately get less done.
Okay, I see the value in focusing on one thing at a time. But what about those times when you have to wait for someone else or something unexpected comes up? Don't you have to switch gears sometimes?
Of course, things happen. and you'll have to pause sometimes. But Tracy's saying we should try to do that as little as possible. He suggests grouping similar tasks together, having specific times for communication, and using tools like project management software to streamline things and avoid all those back and forths.
So being smart about minimizing those disruptions.
Yeah, and recognizing that our brains just aren't wired to multitask effectively. We get way more done when we focus on one thing.
This whole single handling concept is pretty powerful. It really brings together all those other strategies we talked about.
It does. And Tracy believes that if we can master this, it can seriously boost our productivity and help us achieve better results in every part of our lives.
Wow, this deep dive has been so insightful. We've covered eating the frog, setting goals, planning our day, the 80-20 rule, key result areas, creative procrastination, the ABCDE method, constraints, urgency, managing technology, breaking down tasks, creating blocks of time, and now single-handling tasks. That's a lot.
I know, right? But Tracy doesn't just leave us with all these separate ideas. He brings it all together in 21 key tips for beating procrastination and getting more done.
Okay, hit me with the cheat sheet. What are they?
All right, tip number 1, set the table. It's all about defining your goals, writing them down, and making a plan.
Got it. Set yourself up for success. What's next?
Tip number 2, plan every day in advance. Spend a few minutes each morning or the night before making a list of what you need to do that day and prioritize based on importance and urgency.
Planning is key. Okay, tip number 3.
Apply the 80-20 rule to everything. Figure out which 20% of your tasks will give you 80% of your results and focus on those.
Focus on what really moves the needle. Tip number 4.
Consider the consequences. When you're deciding how to spend your time, think about what might happen if you do or don't do a certain task.
Thinking about the big picture. Number 5.
Practice creative procrastination. Put off or even completely ditch those low-value tasks to free up time for the important stuff.
Procrastinate strategically. Okay, number 6.
Use the ABCDE method all the time. Prioritize tasks based on how important and urgent they are, always tackling those A tasks first.
Those A tasks, those are the frogs we gotta eat. What's next?
Tip number 7, focus on key result areas. Zero in on those core responsibilities that are crucial for doing your job well, and make sure you're excelling in those areas.
Focus on what matters. Number 8.
This one's called the Law of 3. Tracy's idea is to figure out the 3 most important things in your work and make sure you do those before anything else.
Interesting. I've never heard of that one. So pick your top 3 and make them your priority. Tip number 9.
Prepare thoroughly before you begin. Get all the information, tools, and resources you need ready before you start working on something. That way you can minimize distractions.
Set yourself up for success. Tip number 10.
Take it one oil barrel at a time. That's Tracy's way of saying break down big, complicated tasks into smaller, more manageable steps.
Break it down into bite-sized pieces. What's number 11?
Upgrade your key skills. Keep learning and getting better at the skills that are most important for your success. The better you get at your key tasks, the faster and more efficiently you'll be able to do them.
Always be improving, right? Tip number 12.
Identify your key constraints. Figure out what's holding you back from reaching your goals, whether it's internal or external, and focus on addressing those things.
Find the bottlenecks, get rid of them. Okay, tip number 13.
Put pressure on yourself. Set deadlines and create a sense of urgency to get yourself moving and avoid procrastination.
Deadlines are powerful motivators. Tip number 14.
Motivate yourself into action. Stay positive, focus on what you're good at, and use affirmations to keep your energy up and stay focused.
Stay positive and motivated. Tip number 15.
Technology is a terrible master. Remember that technology can be super distracting, and be intentional about managing it well. Set boundaries and prioritize your focus.
Make technology work for you, not the other way around. Tip number 16.
This one kind of goes with the last one. Technology is a wonderful servant. Use technology to your advantage. Tools like digital to-do lists, calendar apps, and project management software can really help you be more productive.
Use tech strategically. What's tip number 17?
Focus your attention. Minimize distractions, get rid of interruptions, and really work on your ability to concentrate on one thing at a time.
Eliminate distractions. Focus. Tip number 18.
Slice and dice the task. Break down big, overwhelming tasks into smaller chunks, like we talked about with the salami slice and Swiss cheese methods.
Right, make it manageable. What's number 19?
Create large chunks of time. Block out time on your calendar for focused work on those important tasks.
Make time for deep work. Tip number 20.
Develop a sense of urgency. Cultivate that inner drive to take action and get things done efficiently.
Move with purpose. Okay, last one. Tip number 21.
Single-handle every task. Stay focused on one thing at a time until it's completely done. Resist the urge to multitask or switch between different things.
Got it. Stay focused and finish what you start. Wow, those are some really great tips. No wonder Eat That Frog is so popular. It's full of practical advice that everyone can use.
It really is. And Tracy's point is that this stuff isn't just for business people or high achievers. It's for anyone who wants to take control of their time, stop procrastinating, and achieve more in their lives.
It's all about empowerment, right?
Totally. He believes that if we use these strategies, we can not only get more done, but also feel less stressed, have more energy, and live more fulfilling lives.
It's like this positive feedback loop where success leads to more success.
Exactly. And it all starts with making that simple but powerful choice to eat the frog, to tackle that most important task first, and set yourself up for a more productive and fulfilling day.
It sounds like Eat That Frog is a must-read for like anyone who's ever felt overwhelmed by their to-do list or the struggles with procrastination.
Oh, absolutely. It's a game changer. Tracy's insights are just so practical you can actually use them, and they work.
That's what we like to hear.
He really drives home the point that, being effective is a skill. Anyone can learn it.
Yeah.
It just takes effort and the right strategies.
It's about taking control of your time, your life, really.
Exactly. And Eat That Frog gives you the tools to do that.
Well, this has been a really insightful deep dive. Thanks for walking us through all the key takeaways from Eat That Frog.
Happy to do it. Hope
Yeah.
it helps everyone out there listening.
Me too. So to our listeners, if you could only accomplish one thing this week, something that would have the biggest impact on your life, what would it be? Think about it. What's your frog? And remember, the most important thing is to actually take action. Eat that frog and watch your productivity soar.